Candidate forum for our council candidates. We welcome those here in the gallery as well as those who are with us via JCTV as well as newstribune.com. So at this point, we're going to ask Mayor Turgeon to lead us in a moment of silence as well as a Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence for the victims in Brussels and in Europe today. Thank you. Thank you. Now, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you to the News Tribune for hosting this candidate forum. It's always wonderful to have an opportunity to hear from the candidates directly themselves and to inform the voters. So thanks also to everybody who's joined us. So thank you, Mr. Castor.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, we're excited to get started. We're going to start our forum off with giving the candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves with opening statements. And so we'll start with Rick Mihalovich.
I thank the candidates for their time and effort and interest in the city as well. I've been honored to serve the Second Ward residents for upcoming 4 years, and I look forward to that privilege for another 2. I'm a lifelong Mid-Missourian, moved to Jefferson City in '93. I have a PhD in education, work at State Technical College of Missouri. My wife Connie works in Columbia, and I had 2 adult sons. Why I'm running is to continue the work we've done on the council thus far and to continue my term, and I hope that that experience counts and for the voters April 5th.
Thank you very much. Bud Fisher.
Thank you to News Tribune for hosting this forum, and thank you all for coming tonight. What I get asked more than anything else during this campaign has been why? Why are you running for council? And but I had a little twist in that the other day. I was down at a gentleman's office, and we were just getting ready to sit down. And he said, "Bud, let me ask you, why are you running for councilman?" And then with a pause, he says, "As old as you are." I said, "Whoa!" So anyway, it was good. It was all good. It was too funny. But anyway, why I am running is this. I believe in this. I believe in civic government. I believe in city government. I think this is the fabric. This is the foundation of our democracy. And this is where we have a voice. Here is where we can make a difference. And that opportunity to make a difference is what makes a difference to me.
Thank you. Aaron Wiseman.
Hi, thank you to the News Tribune for inviting me tonight. Thank you for everybody for being here. My name is Aaron Wiseman. I work at Bryden Swearingen in England, where I'm an attorney there. I am running unopposed for the 3rd Ward, and I look forward to serving on the City Council.
Thank you. Glenn Costales.
Thank you, and to echo everyone else, I appreciate the opportunity that's been afforded everyone this evening. I want to continue serving the city. I served the country for about 21 years on active duty in the Air Force, and this past summer I took in 3 nieces and a nephew to raise them, and they want me out of the house a couple nights a month, if not more. So I really need this job to keep those kids happy. Now, I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy serving the folks, not only of the 4th Ward, but the city employees and the entire city of Jefferson. And I want to continue working toward maintaining what we own, the buildings, the equipment, and taking care of what's most important is the heart and soul of the city, and that's the employees.
Thank you. David Durbin.
Thank you. I too would like to thank the News Tribune for this forum this evening and for all the citizens who've come out to express interest in their municipal government. Like some of the other speakers, I'm retired from a number of things. I'm retired from the Naval Reserve, and Glenn was kind enough at one forum that we were at to appreciate my service, and I appreciate his service, and I believe Bud served as well. So we have some former service people and some retirees here, and I appreciate that. I'm also retired from the state of Missouri, where I finished up as Director of Regulation and Licensure at the Department of Health, and I worked for about 6 years for SSM Healthcare before I successfully retired for the third time. And after a couple of years, I was thinking, what's the next chapter of my life? My wife passed away last year, and I was thinking, well, I need to do something constructive, and I would like to give back to the community. I've lived here in Jefferson City since 1999. I've seen a lot of growth. I think there's an opportunity for additional growth, and I thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Larry Henry.
Thank you. As everyone else, I'd like to thank the News Tribune also for having this candidate forum. My name is Larry Henry, as mentioned. I'm running unopposed for the one of the Fifth Ward seats. And, you know, I love serving the community. This is, I'm coming up on 4 years as well, looking forward for another 2. And I had a couple of questions raised by some friends of mine. You know, you're running unopposed. Why would you do this candidate forum when you don't have to? And the one thing that I really think about is I take this position very serious, and I never want to take it for granted. We serve for the community, and this is what we do for the community. And so I want to thank everyone, and specifically the folks of the Fifth Ward who vote for me and who have confidence in the decisions that I make for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. As I said, we're very excited about this. We were very intentional in inviting not only the contested races, but also the uncontested races, because we believe this gives you, the voters, an opportunity, the citizens actually, an opportunity to see who will be on the council, whether they were opposed or whether they were unopposed. So we thank you for joining us tonight. So we're just going to jump right into it. So Rick, we're going to start with you. First question is, where do you stand on historic preservation for Jefferson City? In particular, preservation of buildings 50 years and older with a significant history in our architectural design. How do you propose that we use the rich heritage of our history to increase tourism and revenue into our community and have a vibrant community? This was from a reader that had submitted that question.
That question is one of my top priorities, as is the mayor's, to attempt to do something specifically with regard to Capitol Avenue properties. And we have sponsored resolutions that has the staff to take in the full enforcement of all the ordinances we have, including the abandoned properties ordinance, and we have them monitored on a periodic basis. So the first thing we want to achieve is to ensure that all the ordinances that we have on the books are working and we're using to the fullest extent. And you see the little action on that with regard to some suing we've done and to try to collect money. And the process is awful slow, almost painfully slow, but that's the process you have to adhere if you're going to deal with people's property rights. So we're going through that process. We had a work session the other day that laid out what I think is a very favorable alternative to overlay districts. And I think that will help maintain a character over the long run of a neighborhood, and I really believe that that's the right way to go presently for those abandoned buildings, especially on Capitol Avenue.
Thank you. Bud?
Thank you. And you know what? I think my opponent has been looking at my notes over here, so he kind of stole it coming first, you know. No, basically, you know, I'm in agreement across the board pretty much with where he stands. However, it also touches on a couple of issues called property rights, you know, private property rights. And I am a firm believer of private property rights, okay, as long as they don't engage into somebody else's rights, you know, and then we have a problem. You know, then we have to settle this with some sort of a compromise or whatever. The other thing is, and I can't remember exactly what he said with the terms of enforcement, but I think that, you know, your private property rights don't allow you to let your buildings degrade to the point that they become a nuisance to everybody else, either in the community or the neighborhood. So I believe that we need to maintain the historic nature of Jefferson City. We are a very historic city, and we need to maintain that heritage, okay? But I think that pretty much each individual case needs to have its own determination.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
I'm going to have to echo some of the things that they've already said, so I don't want to repeat what they've said. But, you know, we do have a really rich historic community, and I think that we've been doing a really great job with things like the MSP and increasing tourism. And I think that, you know, the CVB and the mayor and the current council are on the right track in increasing those tourism and increasing tourism in general. I've noticed that the CVB has brought in several different things like ghost hunters and different TV shows to show off the MSP into different portions of the town. And I think those things are really important to us, and I think that's really helping. I also think, to talk about property rights a little bit, I think that we've been doing those things appropriately enforcing those. From what I can tell from reading the newspaper, I clearly haven't been behind closed doors or read the petitions directly, but I believe that we have been appropriately enforcing those, and I think that we need to continue to do that to maintain some of those historic properties that quite frankly need to be better maintained.
Okay, thank you. Glenn?
Thank you, Gary. I think we need to continue while we're doing. Thank you, Madeline. Thank you, Gary. I think we need to continue on the enforcement side to get the owners to do what they should do to maintain their neighborhoods. And for first-time home buyers, we have an Old Town Revitalization Program that they can get some money from the city, and the banks work very well with those folks in that program to get them the loans they need to get in there. But I think it also ends at the personal property rights. If I don't want to maintain my old building, as long as I keep it up to code, that should be my right. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. David?
I think there's at least two, possibly three aspects to your question. First of all, with regard to historic buildings and historic preservation, you mentioned a number of factors to take into consideration in determining whether a particular building or structure needs to be preserved. And I think that mere age in and of itself is not the sole criteria. But many of the other things, you mentioned the significance, perhaps its history, its importance to the community and whatnot, those are factors that should be taken into consideration. Secondly, I think there's an aspect, and the other speakers have addressed, abandoned or dilapidated or not well-maintained buildings. I would certainly agree with Glenn that property owners have the right to use or perhaps not use their property as long as it's maintained within code. But we have had a number of properties that have gone beyond that. I know there was a building on Adams Street across from First Christian Church that caught fire. That was a danger to adjacent landowners. And so I think we have to, and I'm not saying, I think Rick has mentioned code enforcement and ordinance enforcement. I know we've been doing that as well, but those are things that must be blended together to maintain both a safe and an attractive community.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you, Gary. I strongly believe in historic preservation of our buildings, and I think that's why, you know, having the Historic Preservation Commission is so important. Also, the Historic City of Jefferson, they help us out quite a bit with ideas on how we can help maintain these buildings. And as Councilman Mihaljevic mentioned, you know, we have to make sure we're enforcing what we already have as far as codes go, and doing those correctly. And if that means we have to tweak some things in order to get to where we want to get to with that, I'm perfectly okay with that. What we found is when it comes to property rights, you know, this is always a touchy subject because some of us always get those calls about we're butting into here comes government butting into people's rights. Well, the reality of it is in certain instances when we have dilapidated buildings, abandoned buildings in some of our historic areas, that has to be acted upon. And we have codes and laws on the books for that, and we need to be enforcing those. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our second question, again from a reader. We'll begin with Bud. What action do you propose the City Council take to eliminate abandoned properties or rundown properties in Jefferson City?
What actions? I
I think those are probably pretty well determined by our codes and laws and so on. So first of all, I think we have to maintain our codes and our laws in everything that we do. But at the same time, I think that there is a balance that we have to maintain and take a look at each individual situation. I'm the type of guy that if I am elected to this council, there's not going to be a black and a white. There's going to be shades of gray. And those are the shades of gray that I will constantly look into to determine really what the true nature of the situation is, not just in historic situations, but across the board and all that we do as a city council. It's important. I think too much we get out of this balance. You know, everything is black and everything is white, and I think we need to bring everything into a situation where we know the pluses and the minuses across the board, and then we make judgments based upon that. Some of that's called compromise.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
I think that this is somewhat of a subjective question, only because the question calls for an opinion without the basis, I guess, of the building code or without the building inspector. I think that's the first step. Is, you know, is this just a reader, or is this just in general opinion that it's a dilapidated building? You know, we don't want to infringe too much on property owners' rights and just start pointing out different properties that we think are dilapidated. You have to go through a specific process so that way you're not infringing on property owners' rights, and it's important that you get the code enforcer and the building inspector to go through all of those specific steps to get to your end result. Sometimes that's fixed by a simple letter, and sometimes that could be the action that we need to take, is a simple letter, because in reality, a lot of times we just need to reach out and talk to somebody and not assume that they know what the code means.
Okay, thank you. Glenn?
I think the way we're pursuing the owner of about 29 dilapidated buildings around town right now, we are in court. Supposed to be going back, I think, the latter part of April. If we win that, that's going to send a very strong message to the owners of the other abandoned and dilapidated buildings in town. If we lose, it's also going to send a message, and it's not the one that we want to send. And I think if we can win that case, it's going to send a good, strong message that the city is serious about maintaining buildings, and the owners need to step up to the plate, because if not, the city is serious about coming after them to make them maintain what they do own.
Thank you. David?
If I recall the question, it seemed to presuppose that the city council needs to do something that hasn't already done. And my understanding, partially from an article in the Tribune, there had been upwards of 150, 160 buildings that were on a list that needed to be addressed, and in 2015, approximately half of those, 70 some odd, had been removed from, call it the bad building list, for want of a better term. And I think that Rick's comment earlier about what the city staff has been doing says that what we have, if applied, does help to reduce the number of buildings that are on the bad list, if you will. And as Glenn mentioned, there's perhaps one person who's has the bulk of those buildings, and again, the city is taking action, and we would hope that the legal process would move forward in such a way as to support the city's actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you. I think, again, we have to enforce the codes that we have on the books. If that means strengthening those codes, we should, we also need to be looking into that. But I think it's important for folks to realize and understand also that these things this is a process, and as long as this process is went on with the specific owner of a lot of these buildings that we're talking about now, it takes time. But eventually, we do get there. We will get there with this one. But to think that this is, because you always have to go through a legal process, so to think that this is just, that we can enforce something and then it gets taken care of at the drop of a hat, it just doesn't work like that. And so, again, I think we enforce what we have. If those codes need to be stronger, we work to make those codes stronger.
Thank you. And Rick?
Well, to reiterate some of what's been said, we, as present council, we live on the backs of past councils. The work they've done set the stage for what we're doing today. And you can see it downtown with the facade improvements, the Old Town Redevelopment Corporation, and some of the things they've done has been really tremendous. And I think we need to grow those programs and continue those for the good part. We've had suggestions from the historic city of Jefferson to look at what's going on in Paducah, Kentucky, and I think we owe it ourselves to look at that very closely. I think we ought to look at a combination of sticks and carrots to disincentivize what's happening in these buildings and incentivize the kinds of growth we want to see. Because really there's a disincentive for you to build up a property and then get taxed more. And then not to build it up and then you have lower taxes. So there's a lot of issues like that that could be addressed. And again, I'm pretty high on the overlay district and the rezoning that could occur. And the one thing that was brought up in our work session that I'd like us to pursue is landlord inspections at a periodic basis, because in visiting a lot of the Ward 2 residents, there's very nice homes next to some rentals that are just not well kept, and we really owe it to ourselves to do something about that.
Thank you. All right, our third question will begin with Aaron. Again, it was a reader-submitted question. What programs and revenue sources within the existing budget would you cut to balance the budget in case of a revenue shortfall?
I'm going to have to make an admission that I haven't had the opportunity to look at the budget yet, and I will take that opportunity, or I'm taking some opportunities to meet with some important people. I actually am having a meeting with Bob coming up, so that way hopefully he'll discuss some of those things with me. Maybe I'll be able to discuss some of those things with some of the other council members and hopefully get to review some of that myself coming up.
Okay, thank you. Glenn?
Yes, thank you. I'll go back to the 2010 citizen survey. What does it do if the city found it doesn't have enough money? The number one reply by the citizens was reduce services. Second was to raise taxes. Then they responded, if they're going to raise taxes, the number one tax that everybody said to raise, sales tax. So the answers are out there given to the council by the citizens. And it's there. That's just what we would need to do.
Okay. David?
The only other thing I would say is that as far as municipal government is concerned, there are certain core functions, police safety, fire safety, streets and roads. Just philosophically, those would be some of the last things to be reduced. Glenn mentioned that citizens had talked about services and raising taxes, and if that's what the citizens want, then we would need to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you. And quite honestly, to answer a question like that is not clear-cut at all. If the public ever listens or watches us on the television when we go through the budget, we go through every line item, and so to say what I would cut right now would be absolutely impossible to do, because we have so many services. We have so many folks, so many citizens within the community that rely on certain services. So to say what that would be at this point in time would be absolutely impossible to do.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
It's a hard choice. Our high water mark for revenues was, I think, 2011, and we had a major budget shortfall that that many on this current council had to deal with, 1.6 million shortfall. We've really not climbed out of that entirely. We've lost a lot of staff that were important, and I think we're seeing things as we linger on with that budget years ago that we're just now climbing out of. And so it's hard for me to vision not doing with the essential services that we have currently. We get high marks on our police, fire, Public Works and and if anything, we need to increase certain things about how to make better services to our builders to get them ready to build when they're ready to invest in our city. So I'll take a pass on that question as well.
All right. Bud?
Well, again, not being part of the current council or having been one in the past, I don't know the line items that possibly could be looked at a little further or what. But I do know that public safety would be the last place that I would look to do any cuts at this particular time. I think that, being an economics major in college, and everything, I don't like to just look at the debit side. I like to look at the credit side too. And I think that I would look more into what can we do to increase revenues than what we can do to cut services and across the board or per line item. And I'm not just talking about taxes. I am not talking about taxes, but there's other things that I think that if we start thinking outside the box that maybe we can do to increase revenues.
All right. Thank you. All right, our fourth question from a reader. We'll start with Glenn. Do you support the plans of the owners of the Truman Hotels, and will you vote to approve a TIF to support them, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Gary. Yes, I do support the plan put forth by the Puri Group. Right now, the Truman Inn is very old, very worn, and his plan to take a lot of that down and put two new modern hotels there and upgrade the kitchen and conference area, I think it'd be a tremendous boost to the city. And we'd get rid of the eyesore that's sitting there now, which is just an old building.
All right, thank you. David?
I was actually talking with someone about this just a day or two ago, and I remarked that I think the carpet in the big ballroom there is the same carpet that was there in 1975 when I took the bar exam. So just about anything that can be done to upgrade that facility. It's been a major asset to the city of Jefferson for many years. As I say, I can't remember when the bar exam wasn't given at that location. And so whether it's TIF money or whatever, whatever we can do to partner with developers to bring that back into a functioning part of the community would be important.
All right, thank you. Larry?
Thank you. Obviously, we haven't received all the information we need to receive to make an informed decision about that. But that being said, if it makes sense, I'm for it. If it makes sense for our community, I'm for it. As I think about that particular property, I think about all the events that take place here in town, and actually even as I won't say bad, but the property itself has never really been that great, and people still feel that place. We're still filling that place up. And so it's clearly been an important piece of economic development for the city. So if it makes sense, I'd be for it, absolutely.
Thank you. Rick?
Well, the problem Jefferson City's having is we have a reduction in hotel rooms, available hotel rooms. There's a conference going on next week where they're booking in Columbia and all parts around. We just can't accommodate that need. And so if we can't accommodate that need, some people will turn elsewhere to hold their conferences. So we do need the hotel rooms. There's no doubt about that. It's also, as mentioned before, the area is really in need of improvements. It's a part of what I think is a general plan for the area that surrounding Capital Region Medical Center to make that whole area look more inviting. However, I will have to look at the facts that'll be before us on the TIF. Is it a 50% TIF? Is it 100% TIF? What are the circumstances? Is there a CID attached to it? What are the paybacks? Is there some other stipulations that we need to find out? Specifically, I want to have proof that the developer has the wherewithal to develop that property, and also that developer is going to prove to be a good corporate citizen of Jefferson City.
Thank you. Bud?
I think I'm going to close this book so we can't look at it in there. I agree with probably just about everybody up here, that it's too early to make a yes or no type thing as far as a vote would be. But I am extremely excited about the possibilities. I am pro-development. I believe in development. I've made this, but yet I don't just kind of throw that out there, pro-development, with knowing the facts involved with the development and making sure that, that all the other parameters around development are met and private property rights aren't being, diminished or whatever. But I'd like to make this little analogy one time to a person. I said, do you swim? He said, yeah, I swim. He said, you ever tried to tread water? I said, yeah, how long can you tread water? He said, not very long. But I said, if you start swimming, you can go forward, you can last a long time. And I make that analogy with the development. We just can't sit still. We have to continue to make progress. And that this would be a wonderful progressive area to develop in our city.
Thank you. Aaron?
From the article that I read in the News Tribune, it sounds like it's a great project. I think at this point, you've heard a lot of concerns already about committing to a yes or no vote on the TIF, and I have a concern about giving my opinion about voting yes or no without hearing more about it. So,
All right, thank you. All right, our fifth question from a reader. We'll begin with David. What methods would you propose in Jefferson City to create jobs?
Well, the thing that immediately comes to mind is construction work here in the city. And I've talked with some developers and builders, and they've expressed some concerns about the timing on getting plans approved, getting projects moving forward and whatnot. And that is certainly one way that we can get our construction trade people to work. I know there's some other areas where we've had industry here in the city in the past, and if there are ways that the city again can partner with businesses and developers to bring some of those properties back to where they can hire people, I think the city can be a partner with them in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you. I think, quite honestly, we've when it comes to bringing jobs here, we have to have things that are going to attract companies to come here. That's a partnership that we have to have with the chamber of commerce. Clearly, they've done some different things. They've gotten some companies here, but that could probably be stronger. But we have to be able to have some things that are going to attract companies here. We have to look at incentives to bring companies here. And so there's a couple of different things there, just in a nutshell, but we have to absolutely have things that are going to attract companies to want to come here. And we have to have strong presentations in order to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
I'd agree with Mr. Durbin with regard to making it easier to invest and build in the city and speed that process up to incentivize builders to make that investment. I supported our contract with Chamber of Commerce, and they have done well with this last year with the Continental. And essential for Continental to work was, in fact, us working with the county. And to me, one of the things that this city does really well is the 4th of July celebration. When you get the city, the county, the state, and all the entities working together, we can do great things. And I think that's where we need to work on, is to get all those entities to work together. And you can put on things like Salute to America. And I think we can all take pride in that one event.
Thank you. Bud?
Well, it's a little bit of a follow-up to what I said earlier about the pro-development. I think it's through development of some sort, be it even this hotel and so on and so forth. There'd be a lot of jobs created over there if this thing was a viable project and it did go through. I think the MSP, which was introduced last night as a resolution and that passed the city council, is definitely a viable development process that will bring a lot of jobs, into this city over a period of time. But I think in addition to all that, we have to start thinking in terms of, I hate to say outside the box, but I mean, I had a meeting with a gentleman not long ago, and he was very, very pro on developing more and more of an IT industry here in town. And I think that has a lot of viability to it. We are a huge IT user in this town. And the more that we can do to bring that type of technology in here and training and so on and so forth, that then also will bring additional jobs with it other than just the IT jobs themselves.
Thank you. Aaron?
As Larry already touched on, the economic development of the community is pretty important. Our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce is very important. They've been doing a lot of things. I was at the meeting a couple weeks ago and was pretty impressed with the different conferences that they were going to try to reel in different companies to be here. But, you know, something else that we have to think about is what is going to attract young families and what is going to keep them here. So there are things that other people have already talked about for this question, like the MSP and our parks and park and recreation, tourism, all those sort of things that are going to bring people in because, you know, they want to be here. They want to be in the most beautiful small town.
Thank you. Glenn?
Great ideas from everybody so far. I would just piggyback on that by saying we need to reach out to companies like the Polina company based out of Chicago. They specialize in finding clients come to them looking for a place to go to. And they've rated Missouri in the top 10 pro-business states for the last 5 or 6 years. So we're already a pro-business state. We just need to go out and find those big corporations out there that will do the work for us and bring the clients here. We got to sell ourselves to them, and they'll bring the clients here.
All right. Our sixth question will begin with Larry. A reader's question: what would city transportation look like going forward? And they use examples of handy wheels and/or fixed routes.
Oh man, this is an excellent question. And since I've been on the council, this has been an ongoing situation that we've been dealing with at least for 4 years since I've been on, and probably even longer than that since I've been on the council. But you know, we have to find ways. We have to find ways to bring in revenue for transit, to add extra services in regard to handy wheels in our transit system. That's not an easy answer, obviously, whatsoever, but within that process, we've done some different things to try to come up with some ideas. We've created a transit committee. I know Mark Maymert, who's over transit at this point in time, is doing some things with technology to try to increase ridership, and so we have to come up with some different ideas. And with that being said, with those ideas, you know, money is always at the forefront of that. And so bringing in revenue and trying to figure out how we bring in those revenues to increase those services is the big issue there, which we'll continue to work on. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
It's a tough question, and we had to deal with some budget cuts, and transportation transit system was front and center in that discussions. With regard to handy wheels, it's a super valuable service, and the routing, I think, could always be enhanced and worked with. Columbia's tried a spokes instead of the traditional spoke. They've created a different system, and I think we can learn from others. Transit system's a losing proposition. You have to value it as a community, because you got to understand the people that do not have vehicles for any other reason, they're really trapped in their homes. They're really they're sequestered to the homes anytime the transit isn't working, and that includes all the weekends. So we have a lot of people that would like to enjoy the amenities of the city but can't get out because they don't have transit services then. So it's a value we have to place as a community on our citizens that don't have those kinds of transportation. We have tried to put advertising on the buses. To tell you the truth, it's a good idea. It just doesn't generate a lot of revenue. We have reached out to businesses. Chick-fil-A, for one, came and spoke to us saying how valuable it is for their people to be able to make it to work. The first question people are asked, do you have reliable transportation? If they don't get a job. So I think we have to look at it from a business side of the coin and to look at other alternatives in routing.
Thank you. Bud?
I remember as a kid growing up over there on the West School area, and at that time, we actually had a trolley. That's how old I am. We had a trolley that ran right down the middle of the street, and then would turn around there and then go back with electric trolley. And I remember the buses and the trolleys, they were always busy, because that's in the day of one-car family. And ever since then, it kind of instilled in me how important transportation is to Jefferson City. I mean, I think that you talk about bringing employers in or bringing businesses in. I think it's one of the things they look at is what is our transportation system and how well it works. But I would like to expand on that concept of more than just the wheels of buses and so on. But there's other forms of transportation, like walking. There's transportation like riding bikes. There's other transportations. And I've been, because of the second ward that we have a very degrading sidewalk system there, along with a lot of other wards in this city. And I've been doing a lot of research into possible grants, which I have deemed to be possibly available, and also many of the health benefits that come from expanding your sidewalks and expanding your bicycle paths. And there's also some very good CDC is that where a lot of this is coming from. So I would really look into that if I was on the council.
Thank you. Aaron?
The transit is a really important question, and when I went to high school at Jefferson City High School, I actually rode the city bus to the high school. I didn't live that far away, but it was another option instead of riding the actual school bus. And maybe that would be something that we need to look at, is partnering more with our local schools or doing partnerships with other activities to potentially increase revenue or expand our services with the local transit.
Thank you. Glenn?
As Charlie Brown would say, Now, this is, you start talking to the guys in the transit with the knowledge. The regulations set by the federal government are really binding and tie our hands on a lot of things we would like to do. Mr. Maymert, right now, with the technology, they're getting head counts at each of the stops, and we got to look at maximizing and rerouting buses to where they need to be, rather than just they're on this route, and change routes to meet the customer demands. And Handy Wheels is valuable service. We got to keep that running, because I see folks waiting at the stores or waiting on the Handy Wheels to show up to take them and their purchases home.
Thank you. David?
I can only echo what Glenn said, that when you think about the needs of individuals who don't have their own transportation, the needs of businesses for their employees to get to work, not to make the federal government the bully in the room, but complying with the federal regulations can sometimes be very difficult and challenging to meet their requirements and at the same time meet the requirements of our citizens.
Thank you. All right, our seventh question. We'll begin with Rick. Morale has become an issue for some city employees, possibly due to a perceived stagnation in pay and benefits. Do you believe there's an issue with morale at City Hall? And if so, what can the City Council do to address the situation?
Well, first of all, I think lots of companies deal with issues with morale from time to time, but we are aware of some issues that have been brought to the attention of council members, and we have addressed those with our city administrator, and he has a plan to fix it, and we'll be monitoring that. It is his role as our manager to fix the issues that are brought before him. So we want to put it in the hands of the manager, our city manager. But I want to say I don't think that salaries in total will correct the morale issue, if there, to the degree there is a morale issue. It's a combination of things. You got back to 2011, our high water mark of our revenues then. We had a SIP program and we had a reduction in force. We had people doubling up their jobs, and I think we're seeing the results of that today throughout the years. So hopefully our revenues will improve like they have last year, and that we can address many of these issues through our city administrator.
Thank you. Bud?
I read with interest your article. It was a very interesting article, and since then, I have had many conversations with different people that either work for the city or are connected with the city in one way, shape, or form, and it's always been pretty high on the list of things that we would talk about. We know about the morale issue. It's kind of a mixed bag. Many people say there is no morale issue, and many are saying there is, but it's not money. And there's others that say, yes, we do have a money issue here. It's not the same as what it should be. So I don't know. I don't walk the hall of the city hall, so I can't really say at this point in time what my definitive answer is. But I do think that you've got a lot of good people working for this city, and I do know that when you lose people, it becomes very expensive to bring other people back in to take their place and to train them. That's a heck of a lot more expensive than giving people what they are due and what they are worth.
Thank you. Aaron?
It does appear to me that there is a morale issue given the article that was in the newspaper. I think there's a lot of information that I'm not privy to because there have been closed sessions about it, and rightfully so, because the public probably shouldn't know about some of those issues at this point. But I think that's something not only do I need to learn more about on city council, but I think, quite frankly, you start the beginning of every day with a smile and a positive attitude, and that's going to go a long way. You really have to. If you start the day with a frown, and if I personally don't treat people well, they're not going to think well of me. So I think it's going to be important that I treat people well, and that's where I'm going to start is with me.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. I have to echo what Rick said. It's some pay and it's some other issues, and we've given the city administrator some direction to go and guidance on, and to put everything in his hands to take care of the problem. And I have to leave it at that because it does involve personnel issues.
Thank you. David?
Well, I suppose I'm like Will Rogers. All I know about this is what I read in the paper. And I agree with Aaron that there seems to be some reportage that there are some morale issues. I've been a follower, I've been a leader over the years in the Navy and the state at SSM. I would say that morale issues are complex. I think Rick is absolutely right. Very seldom do they deal with just raw compensation. They have to do with conditions of work. They have to do with supervisors and whatnot. And so I'm sure that the city, I would like to believe that the city, the council, the mayor, the city administrator are looking at the whole spectrum of opportunities to address the needs of employees. I also can say from my own personal experience as leading a division of 1,300 people in the state government, sometimes a few people can make it seem like there's a big morale problem in a whole organization. And so I think we have to look very carefully at just exactly what the extent of any morale problems are.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you. There's clearly some issues that's come up in regard to morale here in the city, as Councilman Mihaljevic and Costales have already previously mentioned. What we do is, at this point, we get to the root of the issues and figure out solutions for them, primarily being allowing our city administrator to do his job. That's what he was brought here for, to take care of it, one of the reasons he was brought here for, to help take care of those types of issues, and we monitor those. But again, it's not, especially from the time I've been on the council, we've went through the city's went through hiring freezes. We've went through salary not being able to give raises or increase salaries. So there's always a combination of things when you talk about morale issues. So it's never just down to one thing. So again, we have to come up with solutions to these issues. But one thing I will say is we have to, the employees have to know that they're important to the city, and we have to make them feel that way.
Thank you. All right, the clock on the wall says we may not be out of time, but any good reporter likes to squeeze in one more question, so I'm going to do that. So, Bud, our 8th question starts with you. The Parks and Recreation Commission is underway with the planned $11.5 million wellness center in a joint effort with Lincoln University. What do you think of the project?
Again, this has been really kind of a hot topic that people want to talk about when I have been circulating around and talking to many people as I can in this campaign. For the most part, everybody is for the project, but with certain kind of conditions along the way is what I have been picking up from people. I think the biggest concern is just how much usage the citizens of Jefferson City, may or may not be able to use with the project. But for the most part, there's been a very, very good understanding this is great for Lincoln, University, and personally, I think what is good for Lincoln University, ultimately ends up being good for Jefferson City. So yes, I am very much in favor of the project, and but I would like to see a greater partnership, possibly, that the citizens of Jefferson City feel like they have a vested interest in it as well.
Thank you. Aaron?
I think, as Bud already pointed out, there's a little bit of confusion about the project, or at least it seems that way to me. I think there's some confusion about the use of this particular building. What excites me most about this project is that Lincoln and the city of Jefferson are working together on a project and moving forward in a joint venture. I'm excited that the community is going to have a place with Lincoln, so that way we're able to commingle and see Lincoln do their thing and be in their building, and whether it's their building or our building, that's one of those things I'm not sure about. But I think this is a really exciting venture because of that partnership. But again, the specifics I'm not necessarily sure about, because I'm still confused about.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you. From a council perspective, it did involve us because it was Parks money and Lincoln money, and we have no say over any of that. They did come to us, the Parks did, and request a $1.5 million loan that they did get. I was the only council member who voted against that, because I felt, since we hold the police and fire and public works and the other department directors to live within their budget, that Parks should have been required to live within theirs, and I think we could have used that money for building and equipment maintenance a lot better. I hope it brings in a lot of great tournaments, and it doesn't impact on the ones that we already have, because overall it'd probably be great for the city.
Thank you. David?
I would echo what's been said, that it certainly has the potential for great good for our city. It's just a matter that, as far as the city council is concerned, that we monitor the situation. As Glenn said, it really is a Parks and Rec issue, largely, but still there is a city council involved, and make sure that the programming is what the people of the city of Jefferson are expecting.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you. I think overall, this particular project is an excellent project. It's a great partnership between Parks and Rec, and I'll say the city as well, with Lincoln University. It's been long overdue, and I think what's happened at this point is it shows Lincoln that they're really a part of this community, because for a long time, I think Lincoln has kind of been stigmatized as being their own community, and Lincoln is now really a part of this, and this shows that Lincoln is really part of this community. I think there are misconceptions about the usage, and I think those are questions that obviously ought to be raised to the Parks and Rec Commission, and so I would obviously and really welcome the public to ask those questions. But I think the usage will get worked out. I think in the long run, everyone will be happy with the outcome of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
Well, as you remember, some remember, is a wellness center that LU was going to build, and we were going to build a rec center over around Riverside Park. The rec center, if it were built today, would have 1 or 2 courts. The wellness center would have like a fitness center and maybe very few amenities. Combining the funds was the right idea to get more for what we would have got individually. Now we have, I think, up to 4 playing surfaces, a track, and LU still has a wellness center. The issues I had were much like the public, were what usage will the public get out of this? So when they presented from us, I was satisfied by the answer I got from the director about hours of operation. I totaled them all up, and I don't want to say because I'd get it wrong, but there was ample hours for the public to have access to that facility. The entire facility all the time, maybe not, but in total, I was satisfied by their answers. And then I think the last point is that if you're a student if you're trying to grow students on the LU campus, this is going to be a good thing. They're going to see that and they're going to say, I want to go to school at LU. And that's a great economic development boost. If we can add 1,000 students to LU, that would have a lot of turnover in the community.
Thank you. So that will conclude our general questions for the candidates. As the candidates were alerted earlier, we have other questions from readers as well as our own questions that we'll be asking you in the coming days. And our hope is that we will have a story in Sunday's paper that, again, will address some of these questions that we did not have time to get to tonight. So at this time, we're going to do our closing statements, and we're going to continue our rotation, and we'll start with Aaron.
I just want to thank you again for coming tonight, and thank you again for inviting me to this forum. I really appreciate being involved in this. I'm really excited to be running unopposed for the 3rd Ward. I'm really excited to get to serve on the council. Public service is something that I've always been excited about, and I get to do it firsthand up here, and I'm really looking forward to all the people that I get to meet in this process. I've already met a lot of great people. I've been asking a lot of great questions, or at least I think that they're great questions. So I really am looking forward to being on the council, and I'm just, as you can tell, beyond excited.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you for hosting us. If everybody takes a look, there are 6 individuals sitting up here that have the best interests of the city at heart. I'm running against a very honorable man, and all I encourage the voters to go do is vote. They're the ones who select who sits up here and gets to do the dirty work. It's not always fun, but I encourage them all to vote.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. Again, thank the Tribune and the folks who came out this evening for our forum. I just have sort of 3 ideas in my mind. I'm a big believer in planning. I'm also a believer in carrying out plans once they're created. With regard to growth and development, I referred earlier to some information I've received from developers and builders here in the city that maybe there's some ways to streamline the approval process for development so we can grow more. And then finally, the recognition that public safety support must match our growth, because as we do grow, whether it's residential or commercial, there are additional demands placed on our police and fire. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
Thank you. Just to address Aaron's excitement, that will wear off after a week, trust me. No, but honestly, congratulations to you, Aaron. I'm excited to serve on the council for another 2 years. Again, I'd like to thank specifically the citizens of the 5th Ward for having belief and confidence in me. Thank you for everyone that's out in the audience today. Most of you guys are at our council meetings anyway, so this is kind of like a council meeting to me. So thank you. Thank you, News Tribune, and I look forward to continuing to serve our city.
Thank you. Rick?
I'd like to thank the News Tribune and Mr. Costa for moderating this, and all the people that showed up tonight as well. I think I'd close by saying I think in this case experience is going to count. because we're losing an 8-year veteran on our council. The remaining people have not no more than 4 years of experience come April. And so I think in the first 4 years honored to serve the Second Ward, I've learned a lot. And I hope to use that background to launch a successful next term. As I grew up into the council, I started with youth soccer, then the kids grew up, and then I went to work at the Missouri River Regional Library on the foundation. I was involved in the charrette for the MSP, and then finally got on the planning and zoning. And that really convinced me that I could serve on the council, and today I serve as the chair of the public safety on the finance, and I've served on the administration committees and various other committees that may be too long to list, but I appreciate the consideration, and I think it's so important that you go out and vote. And I appreciate everybody for them to go out and vote and make their voice heard, because it does matter.
Thank you. And Bud?
Again, thank you, News Tribune, for hosting this forum, and thank you all for showing up and being informed citizens. We certainly need more of you. Just one final thought, and it goes around. John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And this is exactly where I'm at. It was an honor to serve my country, and it will be an honor to serve this city, my hometown. I'm retired. I have time, and even at my age, I have the passion and the drive and the skills, I think, to be a good city councilman. But it would take your all support for that to happen. I've been having a lot of fun. I don't know if any of you know my slogan, but we have a slogan that my campaign has been running that says, "This Bud is for us." And I would just like to add to that tonight and say that this Bud is for you, and that this Bud is for the city of Jefferson. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidates, I thank you for coming tonight to answer the questions as fully as you could. I echo your sentiments. We encourage voters to turn out for the vote and to express and choose their next council. So again, thank you and good evening.